Here's what's coming up on episode 54 of the Big Séance podcast. It's just you and me this week, so get your coffee or tea ready, because we're going to take a trip back to 1875. I've got some exciting news about an upcoming live Ouija session. We're going to talk about the Conjuring 2 and the Enfield Poltergeist. And Tim Prasil tells us a rather dramatic story of a 10-foot ghost.
Welcome to the Big Séance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the séance.
Growing up, I don't remember caring too much about history. I've said this before. Other than being fascinated by some of the history of the Civil War battle town where I grew up, I definitely didn't follow or excel at the textbook variety of history. And now that I'm a bit older, and now that I'm a big reader, I find myself wishing I would have paid more attention back then, because there are definitely time periods in American history that fascinate me, particularly the late 1800s and early 1900s, as you know, the Victorian era and the Spiritualist Movement. Well, this last weekend, my partner and I spent a day in St. Louis to get our culture on. I kind of have to be dragged out of the house on the weekends sometimes, but this was a really cool experience, and I'm glad we went. Plus, it was unseasonably warm and around 60 degrees on that day. I almost had to take my hoodie off, and if you know me, you know I get annoyed the first days of spring when I had to start taking my hoodie off. Ugh. Our day began with stopping by the St. Louis Art Museum to see the St. Louis Modern exhibit, which explored that really cool mid-century modern design from architects, artists, and designers from between the years of 1935 and 1965. And all the artifacts had a connection to St. Louis. It was the last day for this particular exhibit, so if you're in the area and you didn't get to see it, well, then you really missed it. And so I apologize for teasing you about it now. And as fascinating as it was, I couldn't help but think about the fact that this time period really wasn't that long ago in the scheme of things. One of the things I noticed about the other guests who were there that day is that quite a few of them were older folks, meaning quite a bit older than myself. For them, I can only imagine that they were there to experience some nostalgia or to reminisce. And you know, some of them had pieces of furniture or maybe even some colorful melamine dinnerware at home that would fit perfectly in that exhibit. Now, since I wasn't alive during this time period, I kept imagining us showing up at the same museum 30 years from now, or heck, even 20 years from now, to get a glimpse of artifacts from the 1980s or 90s. And will people care about that time period? Well, we left the art museum and headed for the Missouri History Museum, where they have an exhibit called A Walk in 1875 St. Louis. I think I'll go ahead and just read some of the description of the exhibit from the Missouri History Museum website. Here we go. One of the most amazing maps of a city ever created was Compton and Dry's Pictorial St. Louis, drawn in 1875 and published in 1876. Using this incredibly detailed cartographic masterpiece as its backdrop, the Missouri History Museum developed A Walk in 1875 St. Louis, a 6,000 square foot exhibition that explores the collective life of 1875 St. Louis through photographs, artifacts, news, writings, and first-hand accounts of the day. In 1874, Richard Compton, a St. Louis sheet music publisher, and Camille Dry, a wandering mechanical draftsman, teamed up on a task that sounds impossible. Draw every single home, building, street, and even tree in St. Louis in accurate perspective. Okay, this is me jumping in here. Did you hear that? Let me read it again. A task that sounds impossible. Draw every single home, building, street, and even tree in St. Louis in accurate perspective. The result was Pictorial St. Louis, the largest pictorial map of any city in the 19th century. The entire map at its original size requires 300 square feet of space to lay out. In A Walk in 1875 St. Louis, the maps are blown up at a scale never before seen, allowing visitors to walk amongst Gilded Age St. Louis in their minds and see everything from the lavish opulence to the crowded tenements. Okay, so back to me. It was definitely cool, although I have to be honest, it was a little overwhelming. Not only was there several rooms with sections of the map blown up on the walls with panels of information in front of the maps, but a modern artist covered every inch of the remaining walls with nothing but facts and historical information about the time, the city, and the map itself. So it was hard to know sometimes where your eyes should start or be looking at any given moment. One of the most interesting realizations you have, or at least I had, when looking at these maps, is the fact that every single home and building is represented. The entire city of St. Louis in 1875, and obviously without the use of a drone or airplane. And according to Wikipedia, during this time period, St. Louis was the fourth largest city in the U.S. after New York City, Philadelphia, and Chicago. It's mind-boggling. There are several districts, neighborhoods, or even entire communities with homes that come straight out of the movie Meet Me in St. Louis when you look at this map, and rows of homes with that amazing Second Empire style with all those mansard roofs. I think those are my favorite. I love that style. Well, for the most part, just about all of those homes and neighborhoods are gone, with some exceptions, of course. According to some of the information we read, many of those beautiful homes and neighborhoods never even made it to 60 years before being torn down for something bigger and better at around the turn of the century or even earlier, for what may now be an office building or a parking lot or a new neighborhood that maybe itself may not even be there anymore. And when I think about this, even though I know that this wasn't uncommon at that time, it makes me angry and sad. What a waste, right? How dare they? A person could have lived the span of their entire life in one of these beautiful homes and in a friendly neighborhood with friends and parties and all those beautiful parlors. Oh, don't get me started with the parlors. But they're gone. And how many people nowadays even know what existed on the lot of their local Walgreens? But then I start being honest with myself, and similar to the question I raised after seeing the St. Louis Modern exhibit, how many of us stop to appreciate the average home or business built in the 1980s or 90s or now? How quick are we to bulldoze a neighborhood or strip mall when it is no longer in fashion? How many times are the fronts of older buildings given newer facades to make it look like everything else around it? 100 years from now, what will be sitting right here on the land where my house sits? And you know what? Since I'm 40 minutes outside of St. Louis in the suburbs, if I go back in time, I don't even know what was on this land 100 years ago. So many questions. I overwhelm myself sometimes. Well, sprinkled throughout the exhibit were artifacts like actual clothing and dresses from 1875, furniture, a high school diploma, and even a mousetrap. And I can't confirm that what I'm about to say is true because, like I said, it was a bit overwhelming, but I don't think they had any artifacts of information about the Spiritualist movement in St. Louis, even though it was definitely alive and kicking here. After a few Google searches, I found a few clippings from articles about seances from the St. Louis Globe Democrat from 1875. And not surprising, one of them apparently claimed to have uncovered that one of these seances was hoaxed. I wondered what our friend Pearl Curran was up to in 1875. Remember, Pearl was a St. Louis housewife who became famous after channeling the spirit of Patience Worth through several popular novels. She used the Ouija board. What was she up to during this time period? Well, unfortunately, she wasn't born yet. I do know that the Fox sisters made it to St. Louis at some point during their tours across the country, but 1875 was already pretty late in their story. But it was still before their infamous confession to being fakers, even though I believe later they reversed their claim. In 1875, several spiritualist societies were being formed, and just for historic reference, the spiritualist camp Lilydale was organized 4 years later in 1879. So I guess if anyone with connections to the Missouri History Museum is listening, I'd love to suggest an exhibit one of these days that highlights spiritualism in the Victorian era. I think they could pull off a room, at least, right? By the way, I dare you to do a Google image search for 1875. Just type in 1875. That's all you need. Sit back and enjoy, because you might be there for a while. So after a few hours at the museums, I kept bugging Joe with, so what was here in 1875? And when we went to lunch in Dogtown, what was here in 1875? Now that I'm back home, I wonder, what would the big seance parlor look like in 1875? By the way, can you tell that lately I've been doing my best to make you feel at home and really capture the atmosphere of the parlor? If you have any other ideas of how I can transport you back in time for the podcast, let me know, please, because I'm kind of experimenting with things.
My grandfather's clock was too large for the shelf.
What we're listening to right now is a song called My Grandfather's Clock, which in 1875 became what was known as the most popular song of the decade. It was written by Henry Clay Work, and it apparently sold 800,000 copies. This particular recording, however, is from 1905.
But it stopped short, never to go again when the old man died. 90 years without slumbering, his life seconds numbering. He stopped short, never to go again when the old man died. It rang an alarm in the dead of the night, an alarm that for years had been dumb. And we knew that his spirit was glooming for flight, that his hour of departure had come. Still the clock kept the time with a soft and muffled chime, as we silently stood by his side. But it stopped short, never to go again when the old man died.
If you are a member of the Big Séance Parlor on Facebook, and if you're not, you should totally find us and request to join. But if you have, then you may have already seen that I've been teasing an upcoming live Ouija session with Karen A. Dahlman, which will happen on Friday, February 26th at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time here in the U.S. I am so excited about this. I know that many of you, including me, have been curious about what one of Karen's Ouija sessions looks like in person. Well, we're going to get the chance to do just that. And this is something that she doesn't usually do. So I'm incredibly honored to have this opportunity. I don't have all the details settled yet. Like, I'm not sure if we'll go live in a Google Plus Hangout like we did in our last live episode with Karen, or if we'll maybe use another platform that might be easier for everyone to participate and be involved or ask questions live. But like last time, you can be sure that you'll at least be able to catch the show at bigseance.com/live when the time comes. Check in at the Facebook group or stay tuned to bigseance.com, and as soon as I have more details, I'll let you know. Until then, do you have any questions for Karen? If you're not able to interact live that evening, then you can send them my way in an email, patrick@bigseance.com, or you just post them in the Big Séance Parlor if you want to. Again, I'm so excited and I can't wait. So mark your calendars. Once again, Friday, February 26th at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Stay tuned. At this moment, I am a little more than 3/4 of the way through the book, This House is Haunted, the amazing inside story of the Enfield Poltergeist by Guy Lyon Playfair. As far as I know, this is the most popular and probably the most trusted account of what happened at Enfield, as the author was involved in most of the investigations and was present for much of the activity. This, of course, is the story that will be featured in The Conjuring 2, coming out very soon. The real events took place in the UK around 1977, and the book was originally published in 1980. I got really excited when it was announced around 2 years ago that the Enfield case would be the story used in the sequel to The Conjuring. But since then, I haven't been able to really find any information about the Warrens being involved in any way. I'm not sure if the movie focuses on the Warrens the whole time, but the trailer out now focuses on Lorraine Warren and Janet, the little girl in the center of the story. I don't have proof that the Warrens were or were not involved in the real case, but I haven't read their names once in Playfair's book so far. But I have seen other folks online pondering the same question. What are the Warrens doing starring in a film about the Enfield Poltergeist in the UK? And the trailer, it's Hollywooded up, of course. And there's a scene with a jillion crucifixes on the wall that seems a little too easy. But what do I know? I'm so not a film critic. And I'll be excited about the movie regardless, and probably take the whole thing with a giant grain of salt when I see it. If anyone out there has heard facts about the Warrens, if they were involved in the case at all, or how they were involved in the case, I'd love to hear from you. A couple of years ago, I blogged about Enfield, and I shared just some of the super creepy actual audio from this case. Aside from the amazing reports of Janet levitating and being thrown across the room on different occasions, and you've probably seen those famous photos by now, but aside from all that, the most interesting activity, I think, that would happen at this home was when several different voices would speak through two of the children in the home, but mainly Janet. The main voice was named Bill, And, some people will laugh and immediately debunk this as the girls creating the voices on their own. But it happened a lot. It would happen for hours at a time. There are witnesses, including members of the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research, and voice experts that have been involved in the investigation as well. It's really interesting stuff. These voices would happen for, like I said, hours every night and became routine, really. I'd like to share just a small clip from some of this audio that can be found easily online. Some of the audio from Enfield, quite frankly, is disturbing and sounds like it comes right out of a horror film. I'm going to highlight a 2-minute segment that is quite a bit more tame and actually very interesting, as it is who I'm assuming is Bill speaking through Janet, explaining how he creates some of the activity, like moving or turning objects over. But it still may seem disturbing to some, and it is a bit creepy. So if you would like to not listen, or if there are younger ears around, you can skip the next 2 minutes and meet me at the other end. So here's your chance to shut everything down. Are you ready? Okay, here's that clip.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Goodbye.
How he did that. Now, you're going to tell me how you knocked that settee over. Come on, tell me how you knocked it over.
By the bottom.
You what? You got it what?
Pulled it by the bottom.
Yes.
Underneath.
Underneath it, yes.
Yes.
And then what did you do? Then what did you do?
Make Janet come in the room first.
Why did you have to make Janet come in the room first?
So she gets the blame.
So she gets the blame?
Yes.
Could you do it if Margaret came in the room first?
Might be her.
Or if Mrs. Hodgson came in the room first, could you do it then?
No, she's too old.
She's too old. Could you do it if I came in the room first?
No.
Well, what's age got to do with it? What difference does it make how
Take
old?
energy from young people, not old ones.
Oh, you only take energy?
Yes.
Why can't you take energy from old people?
I use it all in the day.
Pardon?
I use it all.
Oh, old people use more energy during the day. And do young people store it up then?
Yes.
How do you take their energy?
Electric shock.
You take it by electric shocks?
Mine.
Do you take electrical energy then?
Yes, I can.
If you can?
I can take electric.
You can take electrical
Yes.
energy? If you don't take that energy, could you tip the settee up if you didn't take that energy?
No, I couldn't.
You couldn't
Impossible.
do it? Impossible?
Yes.
You always have to use energy from people?
Yes.
Can't you take energy from anything else?
No.
You can't?
No.
What else can you do with energy?
Tip the chairs over, pull the plugs out,
Yeah, but you can do other things, can't you?
put books through the window.
No, put books through the window. Who put the books through the window?
I did.
Now that will get you to pour one more cup of coffee and stay up for a round of cartoons before bed, won't it? If you're brave enough to hear more, you can find several videos on YouTube, but I'll include the link to at least one of them in the show notes. Well, anyway, I do look forward to the movie, and I may discuss this more once I finish the book. Hopefully I'll finish that very soon. But seriously, if you have facts about this Ed and Lorraine Warren business, do tell.
You're listening to the Big Séance podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
I know that some of you have been patiently waiting for the next audio issue of Tim Prasil's Spectral Edition. I won't keep you waiting any longer. Take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Patrick, and welcome to Spectral Edition, in which I read actual ghost reports published in U.S. newspapers between the years of 1865 and 1918. I have an article here that is an interesting combination of what feels very much like a fisherman's story, how it keeps getting a bit more exaggerated each time it's told. But at the same time, it's got this underlying tragedy to it. It was published in the Pittsburgh Dispatch on July 28, 1890, and the title is A 10-Foot Ghost, Now Making Its Home in a Buckeye Cemetery. A bold young man attempts to brave the spirit, but retreats in confusion. He will not go outdoors after sunset since. Hamilton, Ohio, July 27th. What is claimed to be a genuine ghost has made its appearance here. The apparition has been seen in the Boudinot burying ground in the First Ward by a number of parties. About a year ago, the grounds were put into the hands of the city council, and an effort made to convert them into a park. The grand old trees that had stood for a century and shaded the tombs were cut down, and the grave mounds were leveled to the earth, the stones being carried away. The grave was robbed of its once solemn beauty and the hallowed associations of years disregarded. Day after day the graves were torn open by the plow and the rotting bones thrown promiscuously upon the ground. A few days ago the plowshare turned up a tombstone bearing the inscription Charlie, age 12, son of Herman and Anna Carter. Soon after this, rumors that were calculated to keep the immediate residents in the house after night were circulated, and some superstitious ones declared that in the old cemetery there were ghosts. A few evenings since, Joseph Myers, who resides on Boudinot Street, had a strange experience. While he was sitting in his doorway shortly before retiring, he looked in the direction of the park and saw a queer-looking object appear. From the deserted Carter tomb arose a shrouded figure. It was about 10 feet in height and carried a torch in its outstretched hand, making at times quite a brilliant light. In a short space of time, the figure seemed to rise and glide toward the street. Myers was somewhat nervous for a short time. He arose, however, and walked across the street and pursued it for the purpose of investigation. But before he could approach the mysterious figure, it suddenly disappeared. It is claimed that the spirits of the bodies that belong to these graves, which have been disturbed, nightly promenade the grounds. A young man residing on Park Street boldly asserted that he had no fear of any such thing as a ghost, and that he would fathom the mystery of the apparition. Last Friday night he took a seat in the extreme eastern portion of the cemetery to carry out his design. About midnight the ghost arose before him, and he became so badly frightened that he started at a breakneck speed in an easterly direction, and on the following day was discovered hidden in a blackberry patch near Riley, some 13 miles distant from the corporate limits of Hamilton. Since this adventure, he cannot be persuaded to go outdoors after sunset. If you enjoyed this story, I have more than 200 of them, and I post one each weekend on my website, which is called Vera Van Slyke, Ghostly Mysteries. And now back to Patrick.
Thanks for joining us for the Big Séance podcast. We'd better get back to the table while there's still some candlelight left.
I want to thank Tracy Webwitch, a longtime listener and paranerd, who left this review in iTunes recently. Tracy says, I've been a subscriber for close to a year, so since I now have an iPad mini, I've decided to subscribe on iTunes as well as my Windows Phone podcast app. Patrick is always a treat to listen to, and I love all of the guests he has on, as well as his new Spectral Edition with Tim Prasil's collection of newspaper articles from the past regarding the paranormal. I'm proud to say I'm a paranerd. I always look forward to the next episode. Thank you, Tracy, for a year of support and paranerdness. And we got some love over at bigseance.com from a brand new paranerd by the name of Pat. Pat says, started listening to your podcasts a week or two ago. The Edwin Becker interview was by far my favorite one. Keep up the good work. That was a 2-part interview, and that was really cool. You both rock. Thank you guys very much. And for the Twitter love, there are many people I could thank, but you know them and love them. Lana and John of Carbon Lilies definitely takes the prize for most tweets and retweets of anything Big Séance every day, regularly. I appreciate it as always. Thank you, Lena and John. Well, that's it for today, folks. I hope you didn't mind this solo episode and getting to spend some time, just the two of us together with our Java. And I don't know about you, but the cold temps creeped back up on us here in Missouri just today. So I've been imagining a fire over there too this whole time. Don't forget to stay tuned for details about the upcoming live Ouija session with Karen. In the next couple of days, I dare you to take a bit of time to use your imagination and imagine what life would be like right where you're sitting in 1875, just for fun. And let me know how that goes, especially if you do some research on the spiritualist movement in your area at that time. I think I'll imagine myself right in the middle of a séance. And in 1875, that's likely to put me in the middle of a cornfield. So I'll go ahead and imagine I'm sitting in the Psycho House. Am I still talking?
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com, now the home of both the blog and the podcast. Just click on the Big Séance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Do you have any comments or feedback? Please contact me at patrick@bigseance.com. You can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. You can also record audio feedback right from the site using the SpeakPipe link included in the show notes. I could decide to include your voice in a future show. Thank you so much for listening and reading. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.